Every city has its monster. Some places have the boogeyman, some have Bloody Mary, some have the hitchhiker ghost. But where I grew up, the one that got whispered about in back alleys and bathroom stalls was a man they called the Skin Collector. The stories were always a little different depending on who you asked. Some said he was an escaped lab experiment from the old chemical plant by the river. Others said he was just a homeless guy who went insane after being burned and started taking other people's skin to patch himself together. But the version I heard most often was worse. They said he wasn't a man at all. They said he was something the city itself had made. A thing born out of all the rot, violence, and poison seeping through the concrete. They said he came out of the tunnels at night, carrying cans of acid that he used to melt your flesh, and he'd peel strips of skin off your body to wear. Like trophies. Kids used to dare each other to look in the mirror before bed and check their reflections. If part of your face looked blurred even for a second, it meant the collector had already chosen you. We laughed it off, of course. That's what you do when you're young. You laugh at things that should terrify you. But I can't laugh anymore. Not after last summer. Not after what we found underground. Act 2. The Dare. It started like all dumb teenage stories do, with a dare. My buddy Marcus was always the ringleader, tall, cocky football player with a mouth too big for his own good. He came to us one night buzzing about a rumor he'd heard. Someone had found strips of animal skin nailed to lampposts downtown. But Marcus swore up and down that it wasn't animal. "It's him," he told us, eyes lit up. "It's Acid Man. He's back." There were 4 of us that night. Me, Marcus, Jen, and Caleb. We were bored, restless, and stupid enough to think we could hunt a legend. The plan was to sneak into the abandoned subway tunnels on the east side. They'd been sealed years ago after some accident, but there were still gaps in the fencing if you knew where to look. We met at midnight, armed with cheap flashlights and Marcus's endless bravado. The air grew colder the deeper we went, and the smell hit us almost immediately. Rust, mold, that wet metallic scent of something old and rotting. The tunnels were long and endless, lined with graffiti that looked like it had been scratched on in panic more than painted. We found smashed bottles, burned mattresses, even an old shoe that looked half dissolved. The deeper we went, the more the city above us disappeared. The sounds of cars, music, life, gone. All we had were the drips of water echoing down concrete halls, and our own nervous laughter bouncing back at us like it belonged to someone else. At first it was fun, like we were explorers in some forgotten underworld. Then Caleb spotted something ahead, hanging on the wall. It looked like a rag at first, just some filthy cloth nailed into the concrete. But when Jen shined her light, the truth hit us. It wasn't cloth. It was skin. Thin, grayish, curling at the edges like parchment. You could see the pores, the faint outline of hair, even a faded patch of ink, the remains of a tattoo. Someone had nailed a person's skin to the wall. We froze. The air felt heavier. "Okay," Caleb whispered, his voice cracking. "This is not funny. We should go, now." But Marcus wasn't backing down. His phone was already out recording. "Proof," he muttered. "We'll be legends. No one's ever caught him on camera." That's when we heard it. A sound that didn't belong to us. A slow, steady sloshing, like someone carrying a heavy bucket of water. Step, slosh, step, slosh, and with it, the sharp chemical stench of burning plastic. Act 3. The Collector. We killed our lights. Darkness swallowed everything, thick and suffocating. My heart pounded so loud I swore it echoed off the walls. The sound drew closer. Step, slosh, step, slosh. I held my breath, trying not to make a sound. The smell burned my nostrils, a sour, acrid reek that made my eyes water. Then I saw him. At first just a silhouette. Tall, impossibly tall, shoulders nearly scraping the tunnel ceiling, but when my eyes adjusted, I wished I'd never looked. His face wasn't a face. It was a patchwork quilt of stolen flesh, stitched together with black thread, pale cheeks sewn onto darker jaws, forehead grafted with strips of raw red skin, lips that didn't match, hanging uneven. His eyes rolled in different directions but still seemed to focus on us all at once. In one hand, he carried a dented metal can sloshing liquid over the sides. Steam rose wherever the drops landed, hissing against the floor. In the other hand, he clutched something wet and sagging. It took me too long to realize it was another strip of skin. Marcus should have stayed still, should have shut his damn mouth. But the fool raised his phone again, and the flash went off. For one blinding second, the whole tunnel lit up, and the collector froze. Then his head snapped toward us with this wet, tearing sound. He hissed, not like an animal, not like a man, but like boiling water poured over meat. Then he moved. We ran. The tunnels twisted endlessly, every shadow stretching like claws. Behind us, the sloshing grew faster. Step, slosh, step, slosh. The smell burned hotter, and my lungs screamed for air. Then Caleb tripped. I'll never forget the sound he made when the collector reached him. The can tipped, liquid splashing across his arm. His flesh melted instantly. I didn't look back again. Act 4. The missing piece. We never found Caleb, not what was left of him. When we finally burst out of the tunnels, gasping in the humid summer night, none of us spoke. Jen's sobs echoed down the empty street. Marcus shook so hard his phone slipped from his hand and shattered on the pavement. We swore we'd never talk about it again. Who would believe us anyway? Hey, our friend got skinned alive by a city legend. We'd be locked in a psych ward before anyone listened. But the collector wasn't done. The very next morning, they found a strip of flesh nailed to a bus stop pole 2 blocks from our houses. Not animal, human, with a tattoo we all recognized. Caleb's. Then more pieces showed up. A hand nailed to a mailbox. A face stretched across a boarded window. Jen moved away. She couldn't handle it. Marcus started drinking. Hard. He swore he saw the collector outside his house, sloshing up the sidewalk, but no one else ever saw it. And me? I thought maybe we'd escaped. Maybe the monster had taken his piece and moved on, until last week. I woke up, went to the bathroom, and looked in the mirror. At first I thought I was just groggy, maybe still dreaming. But then I leaned closer. The left side of my face wasn't right. It wasn't blurry, not exactly. More like it had been smudged. The skin didn't reflect. My cheek, my eye, even part of my jaw, gone, erased, like someone had started wiping me out. I reached up with shaking fingers. My hand didn't touch anything, just empty air where my skin should have been. That night, I heard it again, outside my window. Step, slosh, step, slosh. The smell of acid seeped under the glass, burning my throat. He's not finished with me, and next time, he won't just take a piece. I never used to be afraid of rats. I grew up in the city. You see them in the alleys, skittering along dumpsters, darting into storm drains. They're just part of the background. Nasty, sure, but nothing to lose sleep over. But in the building where I live now, they're not background anymore. They're everywhere. The first sign was small, scratching in the walls at night. My son, Jamie, would wake me up whispering, "Mom, the mice are back." We'd had problems before, so I wasn't surprised. I called the landlord, got the usual half-assed promise about sending pest control. Nothing happened. Then I started finding droppings on the kitchen counter, small, black, like pepper grains. At night, I'd hear them running, tiny claws tapping behind the drywall, in the ceiling, in the vents. And then, the smell. A thick, musky stench that never went away no matter how much I scrubbed. It clung to our clothes, our blankets, even our hair. Jamie kept asking if he could sleep in my bed. He said he dreamed the rats were crawling on him, chewing his toes, tugging at his hair. I told him it was just his imagination, but I was wrong. The infestation was real, and it was only just beginning. Months it got worse fast. I'd catch them in the corner of my eye, dark shapes darting across the hall, vanishing into cracks. But these weren't normal rats. They weren't scared of me. Sometimes they'd stop and just stare. Beady black eyes catching the light, whiskers twitching. Then instead of running, they'd move forward, bold. One night, I opened the fridge and screamed. 2 rats were inside, chewing through a package of ground beef. They hissed at me before scurrying away, leaving bloody streaks across the shelves. I called the landlord again, yelling this time. His response? "They're just rats, lady. Welcome to the city." He hung up before I could curse him out. After that, the noises changed. It wasn't just scratching anymore. It was thumping, like dozens of little bodies slamming the walls in unison. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd hear a strange, chittering sound, almost like whispering. Jamie heard it too. One morning he looked pale and sick, refusing to eat his cereal. "They talk to each other," he said softly. "They say they're hungry." I tried to laugh it off, but the way he said it, flat, serious, sent chills crawling up my spine. Then came the night I found the hole. Behind the sofa, the drywall had crumbled. A dark gap, gnawed wider and wider, teeth marks scoring the plaster. I knelt down, shining my phone flashlight in. That's when I realized something important. They weren't infesting us. We were the ones living inside their nest. After that, it became impossible to ignore. The entire building was alive with them. You could hear it if you stood still. The faint tremor of claws, the soft chittering behind every wall. My neighbors stopped leaving their doors open. One family just disappeared in the night, gone without a word. Jamie started refusing to sleep. He'd sit up in bed, wide-eyed, whispering, "They're waiting. They want me to come down." I didn't want to believe him, but the next night I woke up to find his bed empty. I panicked, tearing through the apartment, calling his name. I found the sofa shoved aside. The hole in the wall was wide open. I grabbed a flashlight and crawled in after him. The tunnel was narrow at first, the concrete chewed and scored with countless teeth marks. The deeper I went, the warmer it got, until sweat dripped down my back. The smell was unbearable. Ammonia, rotting meat, and something else I can only describe as alive. I heard Jamie's voice ahead, thin and terrified. "Mom, help!" I crawled faster, scraping my knees on the rough concrete until the tunnel opened into a vast chamber beneath the building. And that's where I saw it. The nest. Thousands of rats moved in unison, their bodies writhing like a single massive organism. They pulsed and shifted together, a living carpet. In the center of it all was something worse, something larger buried under the swarm, a shape that breathed. The rats crawled in and out of it as if it were hollow, feeding it scraps of meat. Its skin was pale and hairless, stretched taut over a body I couldn't fully see, only the ribs heaving, the chest rising and falling, too large to be any animal I knew. And at the edge of the nest, rats surrounded Jamie, chittering, pressing against him, herding him closer to the thing. "Mom!" he screamed. I charged forward, swinging my flashlight like a club, scattering them. I grabbed Jamie, hauling him back toward the tunnel. Rats clawed at my legs, biting, tearing skin. I felt hot blood running down my ankles. But I didn't stop. I didn't dare. We scrambled through the tunnel as the swarm followed, a wall of squealing, gnashing bodies. Somehow, we made it out. I shoved the sofa back against the hole, then collapsed on the floor, clutching Jamie as we both sobbed. But I knew it wasn't over. We moved out the next morning, leaving everything behind. I told the landlord the building was unsafe, that something was living in the basement. He just laughed in my face. 2 weeks later, the news broke. The building had collapsed overnight. Fire crews pulled twisted beams and broken bricks from the wreckage. No survivors. The official story was faulty wiring, maybe a gas leak. But I know better. That building didn't collapse. It was eaten. Sometimes, late at night, when Jamie finally falls asleep, I hear it again. That faint chittering in the walls, the sound of claws just out of sight. I think the nest followed us, and one day soon, it'll start feeding again. When my dad invited me on the hunting trip, I almost said no. We weren't close, not really. He was one of those old-school fathers who thought emotion was weakness and bonding meant sitting in silence with a fishing pole. My parents divorced when I was 8, and since then, our relationship had been reduced to awkward weekend visits and forced conversations about school. So when he called out of nowhere, saying he'd rented a cabin in Texas for a week of real hunting, I hesitated. But something in his voice, maybe the loneliness, maybe guilt, made me agree. The cabin was ours out in the woods, a creaking log structure perched on the edge of endless forest. The air was heavy with pine and dust. The nearest town was 30 miles away, and the road was nothing but ruts and gravel. Inside, the place smelled of damp wood and old animal pelts. Mounted deer heads stared from the walls with glassy eyes. A rusted potbelly stove sat in the corner, and the floorboards sagged under our boots. That first night, Dad sat at the table cleaning his rifle, the oil sharp in the air. "You'll thank me one day," he said. "There's nothing like the thrill of the hunt. Nothing makes you feel more alive." I didn't argue. But something about the way the shadows shifted in that cabin, the way the wind howled against the shutters, made me feel less alive and more prey. The next morning, we set out before dawn. Mist clung low to the ground, curling around our legs as we trudged into the trees. My boots squelched in mud, rifle heavy in my hands. We followed game trails, the forest alive with strange sounds, not the cheerful chirping I'd expected, but deep groans, low cracks of branches, things moving just out of sight. Around noon, we found blood. Not a clean trail, not the neat droplets of a wounded deer. This was smeared across the ground, thick and dark, leading deeper into the woods. Dad crouched down, running his fingers through it, bringing it to his nose like a true hunter. "Fresh," he muttered, "real fresh." But the tracks weren't deer. They weren't anything I recognized. Huge, clawed impressions, too wide for a wolf, too long for a bear. They almost looked human. Just twisted, elongated. Wrong. Dad's eyes lit up. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the hunt." I wanted to turn back. Every instinct screamed at me to turn back. But I followed him. Hours later, we found the first carcass. A buck, or what was left of it. Its rib cage had been ripped open, organs torn out, head gnawed to fragments of skull. The ground was soaked with blood, flies already buzzing. Dad stared at it like it was art. "You see," he whispered, "this is no ordinary predator." And that's when I realized the truth. He hadn't. That night we sat in the cabin with the lamps off, rifles loaded, waiting. The forest outside was alive with noise. Crickets, frogs, the occasional rustle of leaves. But around midnight, it all stopped. The silence was worse than the noise. Then, from the tree line, came a sound I'll never forget. A low, guttural voice. Not an animal call, not human speech, something in between. Words mangled into growls. Dad's eyes went wide. He gripped his rifle so tight his knuckles whitened. The scratching started next, claws against wood. First on the walls, then on the door. Slow, deliberate, like it was testing the cabin. "Stay still," Dad hissed. Through the cracks in the shutters I saw it. At first, just antlers. Massive, twisting shapes that caught the moonlight. Then a face stepped into view, and my blood froze. It was human, almost. Pale, stretched too thin, with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. Its mouth hung open, filled with jagged, broken teeth. The antlers weren't grown. They'd been shoved through its skull, jutting out at odd angles, blood dried around the base, and it was smiling. The creature dragged its claws down the door, the wood hissing and splitting under the pressure. Then it spoke again, low and gurgling. This time, I understood the words. "Come out. Play the hunt." Dad's face was alight with wonder. "Do you hear that?" he whispered. "It knows us." The thing circled the cabin for hours, scratching, whispering, leaving long gouges in the wood. We sat frozen until dawn, when the scratching finally stopped. But I knew it wasn't gone. It was waiting. The next morning, Dad was ecstatic. "We have to follow it," he said. "We have to finish this." I begged him to leave, to pack up, drive away, pretend none of this ever happened. But he was obsessed. I realized then that he hadn't brought me here to bond. He'd brought me as bait. We followed fresh tracks deeper into the forest. The trees grew twisted, the air heavy and foul. We found more carcasses, raccoons, rabbits, even a black bear, all torn apart, organs missing. By dusk, I was exhausted, but Dad pressed on, eyes wild. That's when the creature came. It burst from the trees, faster than anything that size should move. The antlers caught Dad's side, throwing him to the ground. His rifle skittered away. He screamed at me to shoot, but I couldn't move. The creature loomed over him, claws pinning his chest. Its mouth opened wide, stretching too far, and it spoke again. "You are prey." Dad tried to fight, but it bent low, whispering in his ear, almost tender. Then it slashed him open, gutting him like one of the deer. His screams echoed through the trees until they didn't. I ran. I don't remember how long, hours maybe. The forest twisted endlessly, and behind me, always, I heard its voice. "Run, hunt, run." By the time I stumbled back to the cabin, the sun was rising. My father's rifle was gone. So was my father. On the table was something new, a piece of antler, slick with blood. I don't go hunting anymore. I don't go into the woods, but sometimes, at night, I hear it outside my window, scratching, whispering, waiting for me to play the hunt again.